Hi everyone, I'm Arijit Sengupta, founder and CEO of Aible. Before this, I started something called Beyond Core, which was the first smart data discovery company, went on to become Salesforce Einstein Discovery. Actually wrote a book called AI is a Waste of Money, based on 1,000 AI projects I had done at that time. And that led to Harvard Business School, bringing me in to co-create and co-teach the first AI course in the MBA program at Harvard. Recovering nerd, have a few dozen patents in this space. Today, I really wanted to bring some of our customers to speak to you guys about real experiences doing augmented analytics, doing generative AI, because it's easy to talk about these things, but very few people actually have the war wounds who have actually done it. And to get to that group, Bo, if you could introduce yourself.
Sure thing. Thanks, Arijit. Bo Rankin. I'm with Baptist Health South Florida, and I have a background in hospitality, 16 years at Disney, 3 years at Carnival. And I've spent the past 2 in healthcare, and my team likes to make fun of me because I just say an inpatient setting, a hospital is just a hotel, and radiology is just a restaurant. And so that is like anathema. Healthcare is special, but in the end, it's patients doing a whole bunch of different things. They have linens, they get served food, and so that's basically my background, is trying to figure out how to drive improvement in healthcare.
And I'm Jazz Panu. I work for Carelon. It's a Elevance Health company. I'm the VP of Data and Analytics there. Spent about 2/3 of my career in healthcare, 1/3 in about oil and gas. Carelon is actually a prior auth and utilization management company for those of you that are in healthcare. So our main job is to make sure that we drive safe, appropriate, affordable care, and make sure you guys get the right healthcare at the right time in the right place.
Hi, my name is Neeraj Arora, and I work for Ciena. Probably a little bit about Ciena. It's a networking company, and my background is supply chain. And currently, I'm leading an enterprise analytics team and trying to, work on the processes improvement. That's my primary focus area. So I'm at the intersection of the business and the technology in what I do.
Awesome, thank you. And I'm Mike Hansen. I work for Verizon. I'm a director of AI integration. So I work with our technology teams, working to scale out emerging technologies and advanced analytics to our business owners across the business.
Well, thank you, everyone. And from my perspective, I'm just going to do a couple of framing slides. What we're going to talk about is how do you actually deliver value at scale from these kind of technologies? We believe you have to start with kind of a business user first UI, because if the business users are not engaged, you're not going to get value from any of this. But then you have to use generative AI and augmented analytics. These are not separate things, they're actually the same thing. Together, you use it to deliver business impact fast. I'm going to say business impact in days, and hopefully my speakers will back me up when they get to their stories. Safe, how do you do it 100% in your cloud? How do you do it without leaking your data? And efficient, how do you do it at the lowest possible cost? Because with generative AI, if you're not thinking about cost, you're not thinking about how quickly it can scale. And finally, we believe it needs to be done with end-to-end serverless AI to massively reduce the cost. So we're going to talk about each of these things. And in generative AI, we believe you have to have a complete solution. You can't force people to cobble together different tech and then, hey, one solution for structured, one solution for unstructured. You need to have the enterprise controls built in. Things like hallucination double check, making sure a second AI is double checking the generative AI, making sure everything is traced back to source data, making sure you're logging everything, making sure anomalous prompts by users are detected, and then actually allowing the users and use cases to be customized, because it has to be extremely flexible. On the analytics side, it's not just the analytics, which is kind of cool. It is also that augmented data prep, because nobody has clean data, nobody has data that is ready. Then augmented analytics, and then augmented data science and machine learning. How do I have optimizations, predictions, etc.? But first, we'll talk about fast business impact in days. And for this, Bo, I just wanted to go to one of your case studies. If you could tell us what you guys were doing with Aible and what was interesting about it.
Sure thing. Yeah, Arijit. So we looked at, we've spent the past a couple of years building KPIs across the organization, and what's really great about KPIs and related metrics. First of all, we had 260 of them across 12 different domains. And so it was a big, initially a data project, a reporting and dashboarding project. And what we found coming out of that is that we had these nice, clean data sets that we could drop right into Aible. And so, the other thing about looking at your KPIs is we worked really closely with the business, and what are they telling us? They're telling us these are the most important things we need to look at to measure our business. And so if we want to change the business, drive material impact, we need to move no-shows down, and we need to move volumes up. And if we're, so we just drop those KPIs, and then Aible's going to tell us what the drivers are behind that. And so we looked at no-shows, and one of the things that popped out was that for looking at our new patients versus established patients. Turns out, if you look at the top line number, new patients and established patients are almost identical. But then if you look further down the booking curve, if we make patients wait to get a new patient wait to get an appointment, they look very different from established patients. And so we said if we can target those patients that we're making wait 3 months or 6 months and get them in much quicker, turns out they behave like established patients, and established patients aren't so sensitive. And so that is just one of those patterns we would have never thought to go find. And what was great about it is Aible says, we're going to run 95,000 Tableau graphs. We're going to build them for you, and then we're going to serve up for you. These are the 30 you actually should care about. This is where we found meaningful patterns, differences between two different patient populations, or two locations, or two physicians, not two physicians. Sorry, all of our physicians. Here's where who stands out, and finds those outliers for you, so that you can take action, figure out who do you coach, and so this one for the no-shows. We're able to say, well, if we can get those patients in sooner, we'll have a much higher retention rate.
And because we are talking about fast, how long did it take you to start and get those 90,000 questions asked? Was it like 9 months? Was it?
Well, 9 months. Yeah, that's laughable because it takes about 60 seconds. Now, all the work is done. We had to create that data, and again, that's where we just, again, dropped these nice prepped data sets in. It was, we're benefiting from that. It's all getting the data together. That data, creating those KPIs was the hard part. Loading it at Aible literally takes 60 seconds to run, and it created all 95,000 of those combinations for us.
And Michael, you had something similar like this, where you threw us at a data set that we didn't even know what anything meant, and anything you want to share without sharing details, of course?
Yeah, no, but I like the way the tool kind of shows the mappings and relationships between column headers, even if you don't know what they mean, and pulls out those insights, and then goes to the domains to me and says, what is this insight I see, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else?
I guess just the last thing I'd add, this is a quote that basically pulls from a lot of what I just shared, but one of the things that I love about it is that we have dynamic conversations with our business partners. And so our business partners are nurses and doctors, and they're not the most analytical bunch. But if I come from an analytical background and I can share with them, hey, here's what we found, and we explore, and they go, oh, well, that's really interesting. Can you look at it like this? And we just, sure, we pivot right there. It's a real dynamic conversation. It really translates well. In sharing the slide that we just shared, the findings with the cardiology department, our primary business partner just took the presentation and ran with it. And she started presenting it as her own. And, I was just overjoyed because it said, she had internalized it and made sense to her, and she felt ownership because we had collaborated together. It's a great collaborative tool to have business-oriented conversations, not tech-oriented conversations. And I come from a tech department. I'm in T&D.
And actually put 2 more slides in for Bo, because the approach he took for me was fascinating, because he had already looked at these 200 KPIs using a traditional visualization tool that he mentioned before. And then he went in and said the why behind it. You want to walk them through this one and the next one really quickly, what your approach was, because I think it's repeatable by anybody here.
First of all, a couple of things is we created these dashboards, and number one, are our users really using the dashboards? There's nothing more frustrating than spending months or years producing a dashboard and it just sits on a shelf. So number one, are our users using them? Number two, if they're using them, are they using them correctly? And so the way that it's designed is they will go and they'll find, hopefully they stumble across a pattern. And the example I used is we've scattered a bunch of coins out in a 5-acre field and we've given them metal detectors. And it's like, go find one. Go find a coin. And what we've done now instead is we've buried a whole bunch of lightning rods in the ground and said, go find the lightning rods. And it just draws them right to it. And so then finally, on all of our dashboards, there's a bunch of filters. And they said, we want to filter imaging by modality, or we want to filter it by room, or we want to filter it by tech, stuff like that. We already know what's important to them. And so we just, that's where we start is here's our KPI, here's the filters, those are all the features that we load into Aible, and it starts slicing it by modality, finds those patterns for them. It's a pattern finding machine.
Yeah. And what I liked about what they did is they actually looked at the operations of the entire company, not looking at project by project. Here's a dashboard I got to create. But what are the top KPIs? And these are not the exact KPIs they did because that would not be permissible. But one of the funniest things is Bo had to go through a lot of permissions to talk to you guys because people see these kind of analytics as competitive advantage. They don't want to go and tell people. So one of the funniest things we hear from our prospects here is, how come I never heard about Aible if so many people are using you? I'm like, well, because they see us as a competitive advantage. So they often don't want to talk about it. But anything else you would like to add to that, or?
I think that's pretty well said, yeah.
Yeah, so from Carelon perspective, where I think the situation or problem that we had, right, is that we've got a really good team of talented data and analytics folks, right? We've got everything from data scientists, data engineers, data analysts, just a full gamut of analytic skill sets, data and analytic skill sets that you would have on the team. But where we were struggling is that our business is growing. We've got a lot of demand coming into the team, being a health insurance, healthcare payer environment, right? It's a very, very data-driven company. So we were looking internally on the team to figure out, okay, well, how could we possibly fast track a lot of the model development that we have to put together to support our business. And one of the things that was in our test scenario that we had put through Aible, and that's the slide you see here, is that on average before Aible, right, where it might take us 8 weeks to put together one model, Aible was able to churn out 80 times the models that we were looking at, and it was able to do that in a few weeks. And that I would also qualify that few weeks included our setup time and our learning time and a bunch of other, just getting familiar with the tool and whatnot, right? So everything from, your data prep work to your feature selection to your model development deployment. I guess it automates a lot of that process for you, so that, for us at least, being on the healthcare side and being in clinical data, we're working in claims data and reviewing cases 24/7. For us to provide more robust models in that space, it just means that we're able to deliver way better solutions back out to the payers that we support on a day-to-day basis. So I think acceleration was a key thing for us, and then. Next slide here. The other tool that, and this is actually how I engaged Aible at first. So obviously there was a lot of hype last year. We've all heard, right, on the GPT side in the beginning of the year. So I was just thinking to myself, this is going to sound like a very basic use case here, but our team probably spends 30-40% of their time minimum just responding back to day-to-day ad hoc and report requests, right? Is there a way for us to get that off the plate and have a chatbot-like tool driven by Gen AI that we could bolt on top of our foundational data, which again, the data is in a really good spot, right? If we could put Gen AI on top of that, could we provide on-demand insights back out to the business? And this is basic stuff like, somebody, your CFO might ask, well, how is this solution or product performing this month? Or what is our quarter end going to look like? Where are our, in our case, where are MDs spending a lot of time reviewing cases versus the RNs or, RNs or PAs, right? So I think, for us, it was just, I think I guess Chattable, the Aible generative AI tool, it's going to start rolling out to more and more parts of the business just to be able to provide those on-demand insights.
Now, he's talking about prototyping in 2 days. Now, some of you might be saying
2 days.
that why should NLQ need prototyping? Doesn't it just work magically? Isn't AI magic? One of the things we'll have to tell you guys is all of these projects will fail because generative AI doesn't know Carelon specific terminology. It doesn't know how Carelon lays out the data. So you let it fail and then you do the prompt augmentation to cover that little bit of a gap, right? So a little bit of elbow grease, human augmentation, and all of a sudden it actually starts working the way you expect it to work magically. Anything you'd like to add to that, or Michael after that?
Yeah, I mean, look, so I think it was a presentation yesterday where we saw like 50% of companies are trying to look through, like trying to bring Gen AI capabilities in, but only 10% have actually implemented them. To just think that we did something in 2 days on top of our data, that's a pretty big deal. So according to those.
I just want to add to what Arijit that you said. So it's not, I don't know if it's actually a failure, but it's the lessons learned that we can draw so that the next cycle, so like what Edison has said, right? So I've learned how 1,000 ways not to make a bulb, right? So this is now you're starting from the next, milestone now.
Exactly correct.
Yep, I think just simplifying that pipeline and the ability to learn quickly and iterate was helpful for me to understand. Okay, how can prompt tuning help? How can fine tuning help? What else do I need to add to make this more accurate? And how accurate does it need to be for a given use case?
Absolutely, and you're constantly building on top of it. Like you don't dump right into I got to do fine tuning. Start with prompt augmentation, and then when you need it, you do it, right? Well, let's get to the point of safe. So 100% in your cloud. Now, Carelon has to be very careful about data safety, model safety. If you could share a little bit about how you guys thought about safety in this context.
Yeah. So I think right when Gen AI started breaking news last year, the first thing that we did as a company is like establish a lot of firewalls, a lot of security processes, and responsible AI teams that were stood up, right? We have very strict, it's PHI data, patient data, right? A lot of healthcare related information in there. And we have a lot of strict security and protocols around that. And so we needed to find a tool that we could launch relatively quickly and do POCs with, but something that we can deploy internally within our own environment. I think we've also heard this, right, is that I think like you've got these general purpose large language models, Gen AI tools that are out there, but to really get a lot of the value on them, you have to deploy internally and have it on top of your domain specific, your like domain specific use cases, so and domain specific data. And so that's where we're seeing, not only are we minimizing risk by bringing in and we're also able to bring in new capabilities at the same time, and it's a nice balance there.
Absolutely. And one of the interesting things there was in models, you guys really did care about getting models fully inside your cloud. So on Valentine's Day, which is our customer love release, we actually focused on getting Mistral working in the customer's cloud serverless so that the data never has to leave their cloud. It's not even a frozen model. It is literally running inside their cloud. Michael, you had some thoughts on that because running inside the cloud was important to you.
Yeah, there's some use cases where I'm seeing that we just need that capability to be in our own VPC or in our cloud, and it helps to be able to fine tune a model that way and then deploy it to our environment. It's been great.
And anything else you would like to add, Jazz?
No, I think that's, from my end, it's just, so, how do we bring in new capabilities from our end? I mean, we're in the middle of healthcare, right? We have to improve healthcare outcomes and patient care at the same time. So just thinking about these different types of capabilities that we can bring in to do that and accelerate the path to do that, I think has been key for us. So.
And this architecture we're talking about, just talk to us later, but the key thing is this is not software as a service. This is almost like infrastructure as a service. So whatever your cloud, the Aible code is actually running inside your cloud, using your cloud resources, using the appropriate models for the cloud. If it's a small model like Mistral, it's running inside your cloud. So the key difference is all of the data processing actually happens within your cloud. The user interface sits on the user's browser and talks directly to the cloud, never proxying through Aible servers. So though it feels like software and service, it actually is much closer to enterprise software architecture. It's just happening in your cloud. And the implementation is still pretty fast. Like, it's just running a Terraform script. So it's not like you're doing a 6-month implementation. You're doing a 15, 30 minutes implementation. Now let's get to efficient. So Mike, I actually want to come to you on this one. So one of the things that Mike and I were talking about is, hey, how hard will it be to fine tune a model? You want to talk a little bit about what we did there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I've spent the better part of my time over the last year looking at, talking to hundreds of business users around what kind of use cases do they have, collecting those use cases. Some of them are fit for proprietary models or foundation models, and some of them need more specificity, right? And so for me, it was important to understand the trade-off between fine-tuning and the cost to fine-tune or using a pay-as-you-go model, right? And so we kind of worked through this of what will it cost me to fine-tune a small language model in this rapid prototyping environment, and then how can that continue to be deployed and scale? And it was this economic curve was another great way for me to visualize the opportunity cost there as well. Right?
And we were able to show the end users the response from different models and let them pick to make sure that it was comparable. So.
That's a great point. And it was, again, that iterative process. There was maybe a 1-week process where we, like we said, we tried a foundation model, we tried some prompt augmentation in a couple of days, said, is this going to work? No, we need more accuracy. Okay, let me fine tune something like a Mistral or a smaller model and get more accuracy there. And yeah, some of the users, when they were giving us feedback on that versus some of the foundation models, they were equivalent for what they were asking it to do.
Yeah, and that $90 might sound low to you because you might have heard much bigger numbers. That's partially because we can do fine tuning on CPUs, and we can that actually changes the cost structure quite a bit, in case you're wondering why that number is so low. In fact, to bring it up to really low numbers, this is a case study at a Fortune 50 where we did a bunch of work over 3 months. So when I say bunch of work, 25 million charts being evaluated out of 130 data sets, 4,000 chart interactions, 1,000 chart interactions on 4,000 documents, 1,000 predictive models being trained, like absurd amount of work. The total compute after 3 months was about $200. And the reason the compute is so low is because of this kind of a serverless approach to doing this. Your vector DB is not sitting around running until you actually access it. So the cost comes down massively. And you guys can't talk about your actual costs, I know, but like those of you who have seen your operating cost, does this look about right, or am I like completely making this stuff up? Do you feel comfortable sharing, Bo? Because you've had 2 years of operations experience with us.
I'll just say no one's asked us about our costs. So, I take that as a good sign.
Anybody else wants to add anything? Okay.
I think for me, and maybe not on the cost side, but like I said, many business users, there's no shortage of use cases and people that want to try out. So for me, it was important to figure out what is the right opportunity to give them to do that testing. And the serverless approach really appeals to me as a way that maybe not something they want to bring right to production, but something they can learn from and iterate on and build.
Exactly. So Gartner was talking about how only 10% of GenAI projects are going to go to production. You want to have a really low-cost iterative process for rapid prototyping. If you are setting yourself up for a 9-month, $1 million project to build a use case, it's a waste of your time. Remember, there's only a 10% probability of success. You want to be able to do 100 projects in a month. That's the mindset you have to be at. And this is enabled by serverless. I'll go through this very fast. Basically, the idea with serverless is instead of having the server running all the time, you have every component only go on demand. The user interface is really on the user's browser. It communicates to the system only when needed. Only when needed do you ramp up a control surface. Only when needed do you ramp up a vector DB. So that cost structure becomes massively lower, especially when you're experimenting. Because when you're experimenting, you're not using it at the highest capacity all the time. Serverless is the right approach for that. But there's a few other benefits to it, one of which is we are actually finding that in the enterprise, small specialized models are actually better. And that's better with serverless because you want to have many specialized models you're running. With vector DB, not paying for the capacity for the data and only paying when you're actually querying means people, if they put in a bunch of data into it for prototyping and they don't delete it, you're not getting charged. Michael, you want to talk about that a little because you ran into that?
Again, many users, lots of different documents, tens of thousands of documents, right? And data that might be decades old. I don't want to see 10 years from now, I find out that, we had somebody prototype something and we never scrubbed that document out and we've been paying for it for 10 years straight. Right.
Exactly. And there's a few other things on security perspective. Because the vector DB is serverless and the model is serverless, they come up for that use case. You can certify that the AI never saw information that the user couldn't have seen. That is a very unique ability you get when you're doing it serverless, instead of having one big model that looks at everyone's data, one big vector DB that looks at everyone's data. Several other things, feedback can be incorporated very quickly because Michael can have Michael's AI, I can have my AI based on few-shot learning, based on fine-tuning. You can run many models together. Hallucination double check. There's a lot that we can talk about, but fundamentally, serverless changes the art of the possible in generative AI. Anything you'd like to add there, Michael?
Just on the feedback again for that fine-tuning pipeline, the ability to get user feedback quickly, I think is helpful, especially in a rapid prototyping environment where you don't want to build that out for something that may not go to production, right? No, I think this covers a lot of what I just spoke about. So I mean, we're looking at how do we explore. We talk about, so our senior leaders talk about experimenting aggressively but deploying thoughtfully, right? And in this case, this is a platform that allows us to do that, or will hopefully allow us to do that more, right?
Absolutely. And then business user first UI, we have been very focused on that. If you go to Gartner peer reviews, you're going to see lots of positive feedback about our UI. But when I started working with Ciena, one of the interesting challenges that came to us was, well, how do we involve business users? And you had a fantastic view around that. So
yeah, so what I would like to say is, think of technology is a means to an end, right? So we focus on the business outcome, what businesses problems, they are trying to solve. And what we quickly learned, as we all know, the business is looking for speed, right? At the same time, we have to prove the ROI. Now, how do we build those bridges around it in a safe way, right? That was the challenge we had. So what we did was we started making sure we understand the problem statement that business has and work with them, refine the problem, make sure that it is, and as Arijit, we were talking earlier, that you have a good problem statement does not mean you will have all the elements to support and get there. So what started to happening is we have to become very comfortable refining the problem as we peel this onion, right, of generative AI. So what I'm, and then the second thing that we learned from this was, it's the whole data awareness that we talk about. AI is very much part of it. So the AI fluency is not something outside. It is very much integral to the whole process itself. And we have to continually do the reinforcement, looking with internal resources, with external resources. That has been our, from a methodology perspective. And all the AI outcome that we see is to drive the business forward, and it has to be embedded into the business processes. It cannot be outside of the business processes where people are executing this process. It has to be well integrated. So those were the key takeaways that we had. Engage the business sooner rather than later, and make sure we are not just thinking in terms of technology. Technology is an enabler. We need a driver, and that's what the business outcome is.
And one of the fun things we got into was this idea of stop talking about the tech and what's the business, end-to-end business process, like procure to pay, order to cash. How do we take risks and friction out of that using generative AI, using classical AI? The tools, don't start thinking of it as I have a hammer, so I have a generative AI product, so everything is a generative AI problem. Solve the business problem. Do you want to talk to this? Because I think both, and Michael, I'll come to you after that, because both of you were involved in my thinking when I was thinking through this capability we introduced.
Yeah, again, we have to think from an end-to-end process perspective, not just the silos, and involve multiple people, multiple stakeholders, and define the problem in a way, and quickly being able to ask the question and move the processes forward. That has been the learning.
Yeah, and I think working with the business users that I do, it's often outcome focused, and how do we make sure you're getting there? I see a lot of value in being able to go from predictive and the augmented analytics that help them see, how many patients or how long does a patient need, to generative and make those recommendations for them as well, right?
Absolutely. Anything last you want to add?
Yeah, so I always think about data and analytics as a team sport, right? Where the roles have to be clear for, business, for the technology perspective. And we always can do more, but we have to come together to be able to do more is the mantra I use to maximize the ROI for the business.
Thank you so much. So now what? You guys are going to be at Gartner. You have to go back and write a report. So Gartner was talking about for the document search and summary case, the cost might be about, about $1 million. For fine-tuned, like $6 million. The recurring cost is pretty high. So I'm assuming you guys are going to go back and say, well, 10% success rate, that much expense, I might want to think about this, right? What we have focused on is how do you get those costs down? So by using cheaper serverless vector DB, by using cheaper serverless language models, by doing that faster implementation, really good quick prototyping, bring down the cost. Similarly, even for fine-tuned projects, bring down the cost. using CPU, use fine-tuning, etc. This ability to do end-to-end serverless CPU models is actually a pretty unique capability. But people kept telling me, put your money where your mouth is. If you think you can do it so much cheaper, then why don't you just make an offer out of it? So what we did is we said, look, the implementation and all licenses you need for one project for 1 year is included for $250K. 30-day satisfaction guarantee, so we will get the project done in 30 days. If that doesn't work, we'll take a second project, because as I said, GenAI projects have a high risk of failure, but we'll get you successful for $250K, and you get like 10,000 chats out of it, after which you know your operating costs, so you can spend on the models directly. Anybody wants to add any comments to this? Because you guys have been working through these iteration processes with us. So
I see you're carving yourself out a lot of buffer with 30 days.
Well, how long do you think it should take us?
I'd say for us, it was, it took us longer to get through legal and get through IT than it did to actually spin up the use case.
Yeah. Now, the thing is, the art of the possible has changed. We are capping it at 20 organizations, because I'm not a consulting organization, so we have like very few customer success people. But this is just to prove out the art of the possible. You can do this. You can be successful with generative AI today, and it doesn't have to break the bank. It just requires a little bit of awareness that AI is not magical. You will need to do a little bit of elbow grease. You'll have to iterate. But we have the platform where you can iterate and solve problems. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you so much for speaking today. Could you guys please give them a big round?
Thank you.